Hello,
Okay,
everyone. This is Christina Hills, and you are here with Neal Aponte for our My Quest for the Divine show, and we are going to be talking about the spiritual life. Neal is an amazing author. Neal, why don't you tell everyone the title of your book, and then we'll just go ahead and jump right into it.
so the title of my book is In the Shadows of Genesis, which is a recasting, a reinterpretation of these remarkable stories at the heart of our foundation of our civilization, in the book of Genesis, from Adam and Eve all the way through Joseph. And they are really extraordinary stories. And I spent many years really inhabiting the stories as deeply as I could, and to find a new way into the mysterious heart of these remarkable stories.
And I just want to make some comments about it because I read the book and the book is fabulous. And when I was reading the book, it was like you were really feeling Adam and you were really
Mm.
feeling Eve and you were really feeling the characters. And in your writing, you fleshed out who they were more than anyone else I've seen.
Mm.
Like I was almost like kind of caught like that, like wow, I can feel who they are as a person because
Mm.
often in art or movies or whatever, they're very flat 2D people,
Yes.
and you fleshed out who they were and how they felt. And
Mhm.
that's what I really, really liked about your book. Your book is so captivating. Everyone should get your book.
Christina, I mean, those are just wonderful words to hear. And you've just described what I ideally wished and hoped for, in terms of what I'd like to evoke in a reader. Um, I kind of imagined as I was writing a kind of a movie camera perched on my shoulder to really bring the stories as lived moments to life. So the moment in time after Eve has eaten the fruit, but before Adam has, what was that encounter like?
Right.
Um, or the moment in time when God accepted Abel's gifts and refused Cain's, and Cain and Abel confronted each other. What was that encounter like? Or the experience of Noah and his family inside the ark as the first Holocaust survivors, as everything around them was being slaughtered and everything around them clamoring to get on the boat as the water was rising. And of course, God had locked the boat. No one could get in or out. What was that experience like for Noah? It was an utter and terrifying nightmare. Um, or the experience of Abraham and Isaac walking up the mountain. Abraham knows that he's about to sacrifice his son. And what does Isaac know? What does Isaac know, and when does he know it? The sense I have is that Isaac knows everything. How could a father completely disguise what he was about to do, about to kill him, kill his son from the sun? Um, so I really tried to evoke. In each of the stories has dramatic, really truly dramatic moments, and I tried to bring those moments alive for the reader in the way that you just described beautifully.
Yeah, and many of us are already familiar with the biblical stories, some more than others,
Yeah.
but just feeling the feelings of these people as humans, right? With
Yes.
human emotions and human desires and not just a story, not just an archetype, but really you. And as I was reading, and I was like, wow, how does Neal know this? Like, how does he know this? How did he pull this out? And it was really a remarkable book.
Oh, thank you so much, Christina. It means so much to me. Um, one of the striking things, um, that jumps out at any reader, has certainly jumped out at me, is that the book of Genesis is the biblical equivalent of an Aaron Spelling miniseries. It's the biblical equivalent of Dallas. I mean, there's rape, murder, incest, families lying and cheating and stealing from one another. And story after story. I mean, there's the story of Rebecca, who uses one son to betray another to dupe her husband, who literally destroys her family. She's like the Jewish Medea. Um, and so, an important question for any reader of these amazing stories to ask is, why are we being introduced to these deeply, deeply, deeply flawed people? Um, and it's as if in these stories we're being asked to take a full and complete accounting of ourselves, of what it means to be human, in both the noble and the base, for good and for not so good, for evil, which is, intrinsically who we are. Remember that Adam and Eve ate from one fruit from one tree, the knowledge of good and evil. Um, Good and evil inextricably wrapped around one another, and they were ingested together, and so they remain inside each of us. The capacity for good and the capacity for evil. And these stories really express that really evocative and complex nature that we have as human beings.
It's funny, when I first started reading the Bible, I thought, okay, these are all going to be good stories, like, and everyone's going to be moral and righteous. And then I get into it and I'm like, oh my goodness, this person's pretty lousy. Oh my goodness, this other person's pretty lousy. But,
Right.
there's good sides and bad sides to all of us. But your book, just making them more full, was really, really exciting to me. I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to write that book? Like, what was the genesis? Like, how did you, and you're a fabulous writer, so I know you could write
Oh,
about
thank you.
anything.
Thank
But
you.
what inspired you to write that book?
It's a great question, an important question. And if I were to be completely honest, my answer is I'm not sure I know. Uh, to be completely honest, it kind of called to me to be written. If you had told me 30 years ago when I first started reading and writing about these stories, uh, that I would write a book about the book of Genesis, I would have had you committed. I mean, it was the furthest thing from my mind. It wasn't on my radar screen as something that I had any interest in doing. Um, and yet here we are, years later, having written uh, for me, this exciting book. Um, so, in the mid to late '90s, Bill Moyers on PBS had a series on Genesis, which basically was he convened a panel of talking heads each week to talk about one of the stories, and he went through the whole book of Genesis. And I happened on a Sunday afternoon, stumbled on the program, and they were talking about Cain and Abel. And it was an interesting conversation, but the conversation wasn't nearly as interesting as the story itself. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why would God reject the offerings of one son and accept the other? I wonder what that's about. And I, quickly realized that, like everyone else, I had this cursory understanding of the stories, but I hadn't really ever studied them. I hadn't really ever spent a lot of time really, communing with them. And so I don't read Hebrew. And fortunately for me, there were some marvelous new translations that had just come out. Um, and I got a couple of those. And I started reading. And the more I read, the more kind of mysterious it all became. It was kind of the more questions I stumbled upon to answer, the more questions that got evoked for me. Um, and so I began to start at the beginning. I started at the beginning to write about Adam and Eve and the story of creation, but from the serpent's point of view. The serpent seemed to me a really interesting and much maligned character, much misunderstood. It traditionally the serpent gets interpreted as this embodiment of evil and sin and temptation. He's trying uh, to kind of coerce and manipulate Eve to do something she shouldn't be doing. And that line of interpretation always felt really flat, didn't make much sense. And the more time I spent with the story and thinking about the serpent, and thinking about the serpent's relationship with God, and asking the question, if God really wanted Adam and Eve to stay in the garden, what was the serpent doing there, right? Why was he there in the first place? And
And
what was the
I think
relation?
it's that, people are often afraid of the serpent, and
Mm,
so you saying, "Hey, let's look at this from the serpent's perspective" is
yes,
really interesting. It sort of makes us sort of stop and pause and like, okay, let's not be scared and say, "Oh no, bad, I don't want to go near there," but like, huh, let's look at it this way.
yes,
So you
yes.
started this quest a long time ago.
I did. I did. Um, and without the intention of writing a book, I was merely going to write a commentary, an essay of the Adam and Eve and the creation story from the serpent's point of view. But as I uh, began to explain a moment ago, the more questions I asked and raised and sort of tried to answer, the more questions kind of arose and surfaced. And it became a lot more subtle and complex and mysterious. I mean, it really became quite mysterious. Um, what was the serpent doing there? Who was the serpent? What is the relationship between the serpent and God? Is it possible that God created Adam and Eve, never intending them to stay in the garden? And then and it gives me chills
Or
just to even kind of
knowing with their humanity that something would happen, that they would mess it up. Like,
well,
did he know that? Did he know that about them?
so mess it up is an interesting way to frame it, and that is the more traditional way of understanding the story, that this is about the fall from grace, right? Original sin, the eating of the fruit from the forbidden tree. But here's the thing: God creates Adam and Eve, and the text tells us that they were made in God's image. And it's a marvelous question to ask. What does it mean to be made in God's image? And there are probably many, many, many ways to address that question. One of the powerful ways that I kind of approached that question was to think about uh, our capacity to know God as God and to establish an intimate, conscious relationship with God. As far as we know, Christina, the giraffes, the dolphins, or maybe the dolphins can do this. We're not quite sure, but the giraffes, the gorillas, the cats, and the horses, no other creature in nature has that capacity to know God as God and to establish an intimate and a consciously intimate relationship with God. Um, maybe one day we'll realize that elephants and dolphins and other creatures
We're
have
already
that
doing it.
capacity.
We're already doing it. Yeah,
Right.
which is quite possible.
Quite possible.
Right.
But as far as we know,
Right.
with our limited scientific knowledge, as far as we know, we have a unique capacity to know God as God and to establish a relationship with Him or Her. Um, so, um, so kind of thinking about that, I thought, is it possible to know God as God without having knowledge of what good is? What could God possibly mean without having knowledge of good? Um, it seemed to me that we could only, Adam and Eve, and any of us could only know God as God if we had some understanding and experience of what good was. Well, if that's the case, then it turns out that Adam and Eve could never know God as God because they would not, if they remained in the garden, because they would never have knowledge of what good was. If they refused or never ever ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So when I kind of
Right. They
when
didn't
that
have the discernment, right? Before they ate the fruit, they didn't have the discernment.
so
They were
what do you
just
mean?
meaning they were in the Garden of Eden, la-di-da, having a grand old time,
Yes,
not knowing the difference between good and evil, not knowing
right,
they were naked, not knowing
right,
all of these things.
right. Exactly right. Enter the serpent.
Right.
So if God needs them to leave because they have to have knowledge of good in order to know God as God, God from hers boundless creative sort of energy creates the serpent to get the ball rolling, to get Eve and then Adam to do what he needs them to do, which is
Now,
to eat from the tree.
in some depictions of the serpent's a woman. Like
Oh, that's interesting.
I think there's a Michelangelo painting. where
Hmm.
the serpent is a woman.
Okay.
And so some people, now we're kind of deviating a little bit, and I don't have all my facts in front of me, but some people see the serpent as Lilith, who was Adam's, or in some stories, original wife, and that she got in a tussle with God and he turned her into that serpent. And so she's sort of getting back at them. I don't know if you've gone down any of these paths, and I don't have all my facts with me, but that's some stories that I've heard that that serpent was Lilith, who was the spurned first wife.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and I don't explore that in my book, and I haven't really kind of
Right,
explored
because
that.
you're sticking to the text, right? So we
Right.
should probably stick to the text. But what's interesting about this exploration, so this is why I bring it up, is when you go down this path of what's in the Bible and what is it
Hmm.
all about,
Hmm.
you go on this really interesting journey.
Hmm.
And some stories take you outside of the Bible to other peripheral stories, but it's such and whether they're true or not, that's a whole nother discussion. But it's such an interesting journey down this sort of river of where it can take you. And like you point out, you can fix on maybe two sentences in the Bible, and it
Hmm.
can, and you meditate on it and you go deep in it into it, it can take you to amazing places.
Absolutely, Christina. That's a really wonderful and important kind of observation. The language of Genesis is very spare. It's sort of like haiku poetry. Only the bare essentials are there, so that the words are each word and phrase and image is pregnant with meaning, but so are the spaces between the words.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and,
Like, can
and
I give you an example?
yes,
And you know Genesis better than me. And I'm pretty sure it's in Genesis. I should know this. Jacob wrestling with the angel.
yes,
Right. There's not much said about that.
right.
But when you start to think about like, okay, which angel was this? Why was the angel wrestling? Like, what happened before and after? And it's something I was actually thinking about yesterday. Like, okay, who
Huh,
is that angel?
yes,
Because
yes.
I've started studying the nine different types of angels.
Huh.
And so and I was wondering, okay, was that Gabriel or was it Michael, the archangel, or was it a different angel or was it a seraphim? I mean, you know, who or was that his angel, guardian angel? Like, and so my point is, I think it's like only one sentence, possibly
Hmm.
two,
Hmm.
but it makes you think.
Yes.
And did you write about that?
Yes, yes,
Because that is in
absolutely.
Genesis, right?
Of course, of
Yes.
course.
You
It's a
know it
pivotal
better than
moment.
me.
It's a pivotal moment in Jacob's life. Jacob is a schemer. He's a liar. He's a conniver. Always, always kind of wary of everyone and always looking to secure his advantage. And here is a moment, kind of a dark night of the soul, if you will, for Jacob, um, where he's wrestling with this unnamed assailant, an angel, and you kind of riff on the angels, perhaps with God, perhaps with his own conscience of what he's done. He's betrayed his brother not once but twice, duped his father, uh, and perhaps wrestling with an image of his father, wrestling with everything in his life. That is everything that his life has represented. That's scheming and conniving and betraying. It's as if all of the ghosts that he's haunted by appear and surface in this extraordinary evening, this titanic wrestling match with everything and everyone, including God, including himself. Um, and he, for the really only time in his life, he exhibits this tenacious determination to know the truth, to see the truth. He says, tell me who you are. I refuse to let go. And God or the angel strikes him in the hip and wounds him. The truth is um, always is wounding, if you will, to know the truth about who we are. is a kind of a mixed blessing in the sense of that there are things that we learn about ourselves and about life that can be very difficult to swallow, to understand, to assimilate. So, but here is a moment where Jacob is a truth seeker, right? He wants to know the truth of who this assailant is and what his life has been, and he's renamed Israel. And Israel
After
means
this event, right? He's
right.
renamed Israel, right? Which means
He who
wrestle with God. Yes.
and refusing to let go. Right. I mean, this strength and determination, this tenacity um, of 100 men.
Hmm.
But Christina, what's striking about that story is that the morning after he's had this titanic wrestling match and been extraordinarily courageous, extraordinarily tenacious, um, he's about to be reunited. The next morning, he's about to be reunited with his brother Esau for the first time in 20 years. And whereas during this wrestling match, Jacob is tenacious and strong and determined, the next morning, and is renamed Israel, the next morning he reverts back to being Jacob, which is this frightened, scheming, conniving person, frightened that his brother, who he betrayed 20 years ago, is about to kill him, is
Right.
about to exact his revenge and about to kill him. He's learned nothing in 20 years. And he's davening like a frightened child. Oh my God, please God, protect me, save me from my brother. He's about to kill me. And Esau comes with 400 men, right? You can imagine whether it's across the desert or across the plain, a group of 400 men approaching, galloping on their horses or their camels. And you can imagine Jacob thinking, oh my God, I'm about to die. Esau's going to kill me. Please, God, help me. Esau gets off his horse, gets off his camel, runs towards his brother. And Jacob, fearing the worst, is astonished when all Esau wants to do is to hug and kiss and embrace his brother. And in the other moment of truth of Jacob's life, Jacob says to Esau, looking at your face is like looking at the face of a god. What an astonishing thing to say. Or it could be translated, looking at the face of God himself. Jacob recognizes that something remarkable and dramatic has happened to his brother. Esau has moved from a place of murderous rage 20 years prior. Jacob has stolen his father's blessing, and the text tells us that Esau says, when my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. And Rebekah, the mother, overhears that and tells Jacob to skedaddle, to scram, to lay low until Esau cools off. So Esau has moved from a place of murderous rage to a place of utter and complete forgiveness. All he wants to do is to be reunited with his brother and to love his brother.
It's so interesting because Jacob, in a way, is a more important character in the Bible, and I'm using the term character, which I hope is okay. But his brother Esau has gone
Yeah,
through a bigger transformation.
absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
than Jacob. But Jacob is this,
Patriarch. He's the patriarch.
patriarch. Exactly. He's the patriarch. But it's so interesting. And
Well, Christine, if I can interrupt, just to kind of close the circle with Jacob and Esau. Uh, you know, Esau has undergone this remarkable transformation. Jacob has not. He's learned nothing in 20 years. Esau has forgiven his brother for this horrible actions perpetrated against him. The text, of course, doesn't tell us what's happened to Esau. Right? It doesn't say anything about Esau.
right,
We have to, again, dive into the spaces between the
right,
words and
right.
figure out how Esau has shifted, has transformed himself from a place of wanting to kill Jacob, wanting to kill the son of a bitch, to completely forgiving him and this expression of loving kindness. What made that possible? How has Esau forgiven his brother? What does it mean to forgive? Are there things that can't be forgiven? So that Esau becomes this remarkable teacher about something that's important for all of us, which is forgiveness.
And it's not something we're expecting, right? We're
Right.
we're not expecting that. We're
Right.
expecting, I always envision him as this sort of big oaf, right? Esau,
Yes.
this
Yes.
burly oaf,
Yes,
and that
exactly.
Jacob is the smarter, skinnier, more frail
Yes.
person. But really, it Esau's sort of the bigger person because
Yes.
he's gone through this transformation.
Yes. And you're absolutely right about Esau. He's a kind of impulsive, impetuous hunter who's, thinking in black and white, and is this kind of burly guy who's at home in his body and is not necessarily thinking about things along the way that Jacob, of course, always is, as you allude to. But there has been this remarkable shift. He's a remarkable teacher, and Judaism um, has kind of written him out of the script. Esau is the ancestor for the enemies of the Jews, the Edomites, the Romans. And it's unfortunate that the whole experience of Esau as a remarkable teacher about forgiveness is lost or consigned to the margins. And I kind of want to rehabilitate Esau to bring him front and center where he belongs. He's a hero of mine, as is the serpent. Uh, so Esau is a remarkable teacher and a remarkable hero for me.
And again, just wrapping up what I want to say, wrapping up this interview, what I want to say is this is where your book is brilliant. You fill in so many of the gaps
Mm.
of the questions we have or the questions we didn't know we had or
Yes,
the things we hadn't thought about.
yes.
So that's why I absolutely love your book, In the Shadows of Genesis, and I recommend everybody go out and get that book.
Well, thank you so much. It's kind of delightful to be with you, Christina, and always a pleasure to talk about these remarkable stories. And thank you for your kind words about my writing and my book.
You're most welcome. And if anybody wants more information, you can just go to questforthedivine.com. This is Christina Hills.